So, in a capsule, I guess, what is the message you're bringing to Canadians on this tour?
I am here to drum up support for Israel in Canada as we fight for our lives on seven fronts. This is a seven-front war. We're not just fighting Hamas. We're fighting the Iranian regime and its proxy armies all across the Middle East, under attack from Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria, Palestinian terrorists and the Iranian regime itself. Israel is a key Canadian ally, and I'm here to make the case to the Canadian people why we need to stand together, Israelis and Canadians, and also to stand up for the Jewish community here, which is feeling really scared and worried by a resurgence of anti-Semitism that they never thought they would see.
What is your take on, I mean, I realize it's not monolithic, the Canadian or the stance of Canadians vis-a-vis this conflict, because I'm sure you're well aware of the protests, the pro-Palestinian protests that take place almost on a weekly basis here in this city.
Those protests have really crossed a line from political protests into full-on jihadi war cries. And if there's one thing I hope the Canadian people understand, it's that we are talking about a homegrown domestic extremism problem. I was at the University of Calgary just a few days ago and had a mob banging on the door chanting Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And I think we can all agree that crosses the line from any sort of political protest into full-on Islamic extremism. You've got people calling globalize the Intifada. What does that mean? Well, the Intifada was a wave of suicide bombings against Israelis. It means bring terrorism to Canada. They're chanting from the river to the sea. That's a call for the destruction of the state of Israel. Now, I know most Canadians, Canada is an ally of Israel. Israel is part of the West. We're fighting for humanity, on the front lines of humanity, against the Iranian regime that hates Canada too. And we need Canadians to understand why we are fighting, to bring down Hamas, to bring back the hostages, still 101 hostages trapped in Gaza, because there is a movement now that is telling the most ridiculous lies about Israel to try to isolate it, to try to cut it off from its allies like Canada, to try to force it to accept that the October 7th terrorists will continue running Gaza after this war. And we're determined to fight for our survival, and we want to do it with the support of our friends and allies.
I would imagine you're also hearing, though, from many critics of the Israeli Defense Forces and Israel's defense posture and strategy owing to the number of civilian dead in Gaza. And I wonder how you counter that, because it's not just Israel haters and anti-Semites. I mean, I know plenty of Jewish people who feel that this has gone on too long and it's gone too far.
I hear that. We have to remember that this is not a war that Israel wanted or started, and it's a war that Hamas is deliberately fighting from inside civilian areas. Hamas built a tunnel network longer than the New York subway, under homes, schools, hospitals, mosques, UN facilities, because it had a strategy. That strategy was to sacrifice its own civilians, in the hope that images of suffering would pressure Israel to stop and leave Hamas in power and abandon the hostages. And Israel has therefore had to take innovative steps going further than any army in history to try to keep civilians safe from the consequences of their leaders' own decisions, to try to put them in harm's way. So I don't for a moment downplay that there is suffering among civilians in Gaza, but I know to point the finger very clearly that the fault lies with the psychopathic Islamic terrorists who declared this war, who continue to fight this war from inside civilian areas, and who have refused every opportunity to end this war by laying down their arms and freeing the hostages, because that's all Israel is asking for.
Thank you for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Eylon Levy is former spokesperson for the State of Israel.